a reminder that Dan Campbell has got a set of stones on him that is
oh my God.
like, and it's funny, like we always talk about identity, right? But I keep thinking about how there are certain guys that just get benefit of the doubt because we bought into who they are. We buy into the results. We buy into the personality. We see this all the time. Risky coaches, we will critique. Even if they're right, we will critique their strategy over and over and over again. Dan Campbell has just become such a beloved figure, and the Lions are so beloved that everybody's looking at, of course he went for it on fourth down. Like, the Lions get an improbable win out of a gutsy call by Dan Campbell, and I just kept thinking, this proves how much different the Lions are today because they now get something they've never gotten before, which is benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it's pathological how crazy he is when it comes to the risks. Like, it's in a game where you went for it deep in your own territory, you didn't make it, and the result was the Packers taking over and scoring 7 points, which is just, it feels devastating, right? Like, we're used to in most NFL football games when a coach makes a significant error like that, which in an isolated case would be considered historically just an unbelievably significant error. We're used to it completely changing the complexion of game, and often teams won't recover from that. Like, it's just such a gut punch that they won't recover. Not only do the Lions recover, but then Dan Campbell, as you said, again, late against the Packers on 4th and inches, when he could have just kicked a field goal, and dealt with the remaining clock with the Packers, which would have been less than a minute left. Dan Campbell goes for it. Jared Goff gets his foot stepped on, falls enough to hard plant a knee into the ground, and yet is able to get the ball into David Montgomery's basket. And obviously David Montgomery runs for the first down, and it's just this euphoric moment for the Detroit Lions. But I was screaming. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, there's no way they're going for it. Like, I'm yelling. I'm like, they're clearly just trying to draw them off sides. And then when the ball snapped, I was like, oh my God, like, what are you doing? Like, I'm just losing my mind. And as someone who started his career covering the Lions when they were just they were horrible. It was awful. I mean, it covered the Marty Mornhinweg, Matt Millen era. The 2 years of that I covered, they won 5 games. 5-27. The god awfulness of that to kind of where they are now, 11 straight wins, they clinch a playoff berth. To be 12-1 is insane. This team is, again, they've gotten cocky, and at times I think they've gotten a little bit too big for their britches, but I still think it's a team that everybody has to root for. Going into this next offseason. Not quite like last year. Now there's a little bit more of a villain, I think, shadow on them than there was last year, because it's not new now. Now it's them repeating themselves and maintaining this stance as a Super Bowl favorite. But I'm more excited than ever, by the way, to see that Buffalo Bills game when Josh Allen and the Lions match up.
I just think it's interesting because, I mean, Brandon Staley got to the point with the Chargers, and look, it didn't work over and over and over again. We know that. But Brandon Staley got to the point where he could call a play on 3rd down, and we'd be sitting there saying, well, this idiot's going to blow it on 4th down. And to your point, the Lions could have just easily kicked the ball, had the game in hand.
They have a good kicker, Fitz. They have a good kicker. Like, what's going on?
The fact that they could have easily just made this simple, and then they didn't. But I was also thinking about the fact that it wasn't simple, because this matchup, a good matchup, but I'm not sure where I am. And, frankly, Frank Schwab and I were texting about this last night. I'm not sure where to be on Jordan Love right now, because Jordan Love looks like he's good. It's not that he doesn't look. I want to stress this, because I don't think Jordan Love, like, we make everything either great or sucks. I think there's a whole middle ground here. Like, Jordan Love looks like he's good, but man, you just mentioned can't wait for that Bills matchup. I don't look at Jordan Love and think, Josh Allen. I don't look at Jordan Love and think, Joe Burrow. I look at Jordan Love and think, good. Like, maybe a little bit better than a Derek Carr. Like, he'll make some plays that'll win you games. He'll make some plays that'll lose you games. And if I'm Green Bay, man, I'm looking at this thing saying, golly, I need a little bit more out of my paid like a superstar quarterback to win these sorts of games.
I was shocked at the end of the game when you look at it and you see what the score is, and you go, well, geez, he only threw 20 pass attempts. But then you realize that 14 of the points that the Packers scored came off of There was a Jared Goff turnover deep in Lions territory. So short field they're working on, and they score. And then you had the fourth down that Dan Campbell went for deep in his own territory, doesn't get it, which is a turnover. Effectively, to me, it's a coaching turnover, right? And they scored a touchdown on a short field off of that. So when you look at the Packers, the number of points the Packers score in this game, you think, oh, prolific, like, oh, it was a prolific offensive performance. It really wasn't, and we've seen the Packers, particularly recently, shift very hard into the running game and Josh Jacobs. Last night, what I wondered was, is Romeo Doubs like this important to the production of Jordan Love? Because clearly Christian Watson, I think, he had a really good game other than the fumble. Obviously, that was a really costly turnover. Dontavian Wicks, who I really thought was going to be an X factor for the wide receiving core, has had horrible hands this season, especially early on, was just dropping stuff left and right, became almost an unplayable piece in that offense. Last night, he was better, was a contributing piece, but it still felt like there was something missing in that passing game. And I think it was a balanced offense, but it just was not as prolific as what I expected, particularly, and I think even on balance in 2024, I expected a lot more from Jordan Love in the passing offense coming out of last year, right? The second half of last season in the playoff performance. I'm like, oh my God, like this is Jordan Love low key coming into the season. Like some people are like, he's a dark horse MVP candidate, right? Like this guy could throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns in this offense. I'm with you. I still think he's a really good player. He has not taken last year's run and elevated his level of play to that shelf and kept it there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's I don't want to say it's concerning for Green Bay. It's still a great team, by the way. I don't want to bag out Green Bay, right? Like this is a playoff team.
They lost by 3 to the number 1 seed in the NFC. Like there's no shame in.
Yeah, not at all. But Fitz, I'll ask you this. The Lions don't have defensively, can you lose anymore? Like Aleem McNeil goes out last night, the middle of the defense. It was just, it was Charmin soft as soon as Aleem McNeil exited the game. And I'm sitting there and I'm staring at it. And then, Brian Branch at one point's banged up late in the game. I'm like, you can't lose anybody else. Like there were times during the game where I'm seeing guys and they turn around and make a tackle and turn around. And I'm like, I don't even know who that guy is. Like, I'm like, there are players in their defense playing right now where I have to familiarize myself with where these guys came from. Like Jamal Adams coming off the scrap heap, right? Who can't do really anything but rush the passer. That's it. That's you put a couple packages in, you tell them, go get the quarterback. They're going to throw it. Go get the quarterback. That's what we're expecting from you, or tackle the ball carrier. Nothing else. Definitely don't drop in coverage. I don't know what else that defense can do.
Yeah, I think that defense is at like a hold my beer spot. Like when we sit here and apologize for the 49ers underachieving because of injuries, I think the Lions defense could turn around and say, oh, I'd like to show you a list, good sir, right? Like you can start to look at it and think about how much change we've seen to the Lions, to the fact that, to your point, last night, they did not play a particularly clean game at times. They were not as dominant as they usually are at times. They are decimated on the defensive side of the ball, and they still won. Like second game in a row where the Lions haven't really looked great, but they've turned around and won the football game. And, I just sort of laugh at that because I can't even imagine what the Lions would be like if they were healthy right now. Like, I can't even imagine if Aiden Hutchinson, and this isn't even just an Aiden Hutchinson conversation. Like, we say all the time about bad football teams, the depth is going to be tested. And I think this is sort of living, breathing, eating proof that your really good football teams are built with a better level of depth. Their second and third stringers can step in. Like, next man up is a cute concept if you've got a really good GM and a really strong organization. Next man up doesn't work if your team sucks, right? And so it's just, I watched the Lions last night and thought, man, this wasn't the best game from the Packers, and it wasn't the best game from the Lions, and the Lions still got to win. That has to speak something to where Detroit is. Yeah,
and again, if you take away the two deep in their territory turnovers, the Goff interception, the Dan Campbell going for it on fourth and not getting it, the defense limited the Packers to 17 points that were not a function of giving the ball away inside your own 30, right? And or basically at your own 30. So that's a pretty damn good defensive performance. It speaks pretty well. I'm not banging on Aaron Glenn at this point, right? Because you're sitting there and you're watching what he's producing a pass rush with. And again, there's just guys where I'm like, they signed this guy off of a practice. Like I look at, Jamal Adams, you're like, they literally signed him to the practice squad and immediately activated him. And he's a player who, when I saw him in Tennessee, I was like, oh my God, like I don't know that there's really a play left in this guy. And then I think it was like the first snap he's in the game, he's in on a quarterback pressure. The first snap he's in the game, and so Aaron Glenn's dialing up, I think, everything he can defensively, particularly from a pressure standpoint. I hope, I think from the standpoint of really good football and wanting to see the Lions at least closer to what they could potentially be, I hope they get some of these guys back. They're going to have players returning from injury. There's not everybody's been lost for the season. It's going to take some time, but I think as we get closer to the postseason, that defense will be in much better shape, I think, than it is now from a talent standpoint. But as you said, it speaks to where the Lions are, that they can play a really good team, a really good offense, be completely undermanned on defense, and still feel like they were very much, I don't want to say in complete command of that game, but at no point, and I'm curious if you felt this way, at no point when I watched did I feel like Detroit won't be able to respond. I just never felt like every time they got hit, I was like, okay, the offense is their best defense. That offense is so good, they'll be able to respond. And that's ultimately what ended up happening.
Even when they're not running the ball as well with Jahmyr Gibbs as I think they should. It is funny how many little things for the Lions I didn't feel like were going right, but you're right. The whole time I thought, all right, they're gonna figure out a way to win this.